Welcome to Rewiring Health, your hub for transformation and empowerment. I'm your host, Kelly Kessler, and I'm here to guide you in aligning with your true self. Discover the freedom and vibrancy within you as we release patterns of self-abandonment and transcend the health impacts of stress. Get ready to unlock your potential and embrace the freedom and vitality you've been seeking. Now let's dive in. Whether it's finances, looks, achievements, accolades, when you rely on the outside world to determine your level of success in life and your level of self-worth, you can often feel like you're on a treadmill that you cannot quite keep up the pace. Life just seems to pass you by. You're exhausting yourself. You're seeing all your internal resources drained, and you're wondering how you're going to scrounge up enough energy to just show up in life. Easily, things can start to feel chaotic, like they're spinning out of control, and yet the pressure to continue at this pace is unrelenting. And this is why I'm so grateful to have Tom Cronin on the podcast today. Tom Cronin spent 26 years in finance markets as one of Australia's leading bond and swap brokers. He discovered meditation in the early stages of his career when the anxiety and chaos he was experiencing had hit a crisis point, and it completely transformed his world both personally and professionally. Founder of the Stillness Project, a global movement to inspire 1 billion people to sit in stillness daily, Tom is passionate about reducing stress and chaos in people's lives. His ongoing work in transformational leadership coaching and corporate training has seen him working with some of the top companies in the world like Amazon, Boston Consulting Group, Oracle, Harvard Business School, UBS, and Coca-Cola. He has spoken on stage at conferences and events like Ad News Summit, A-Fest, Wanderlust, and Mind Heart Connection. Tom has 6 books published and has produced the hit documentary, The Portal. In this conversation, Tom shares so many aspects of his life that I'm sure will deeply resonate with you, and how he went from chaos to feeling stillness and inner peace. I'm so grateful for everything he shared and how you can start to cultivate peace in your life and transform yourself from the inside out. All right. Welcome, Tom Cronin. I am so honored to have you on the podcast today. So thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. And so I want to just dive right into it because something I think so many of us are challenged with, and it's almost like we get caught up in like the messages of society of like, look outside yourself. You get the job, you should feel fulfilled. You make a certain income, you should feel fulfilled. You have kids, get married, like all the things outside ourselves. And then we hit these milestones in life and then we're left like, is this it? You know, where is that feeling that I was really trying to feel? So can you kind of talk on that? Is like, why do we get sucked into this mental aspect of like looking outside ourselves and then ending up feeling very empty with that?
Yeah, it's a deep code and construct in our society that good things will make me feel good and bad things will make me feel bad. And we're constantly in this reactive state. And there are 2 sources of fulfillment. And the one that 99.999% of the world are currently in is outcome-oriented fulfillment. That is, if I get an outcome, then I'll feel fulfilled. And this outcome-oriented fulfillment really puts us at the mercy of circumstances, events, acquisitions, as you say, the external world. Now, the problem with outcome-oriented fulfillment is, firstly, a lot of the outcomes don't meet our expectation. And secondly, even if they do, like we buy the nice dress or we get some new shoes or we find someone that we want to marry and live with, then that can wear off quite quickly. The influence and effect that we're getting from that can erode quite quickly. And then we have to go back into another outcome to get another level of fulfillment. So what we want to do is we want to flip that and we want to go into what we call self-referred fulfillment. And that is a fulfillment that arises from deep within. And it sounds corny and cliched, but what we've found through spiritual practices and certain modalities is that we can harness and cultivate an internal arising of bliss, love, and joy that is actually the very essence and the core of who we are. It's just that from the very get-go, when we come out of that womb, we start looking at the boob, we start looking at the dummy, we start looking at the toys, we start looking at the TV, and this external validation and extraction of fulfillment is something that happens from a very young age. And as we mature, we want to start flipping that and start looking within and finding a sustainable, non-referred sort of fulfillment that comes from an internal state.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes so much sense because so much of who we are today gets formed in those early years. So it's like
Yeah.
can be really challenging to break those patterns. And I would love to hear part of your story of like what was your experience with that in your life and how have you transitioned into looking more internally to feel that fulfillment?
Yeah, I couldn't have been more of a classic example of, extraction and commoditization of fulfillment from the outside world, where as a broker in finance and earning huge sums of money, I had everything you could possibly want. I had a beautiful big house, I had a fancy car, I had lots of money, I had some of the top restaurants in Sydney that I was eating at every week, and all the things you could possibly want as far as ticking a box and saying that's the life you should aspire to. I had it all. And even just not long ago, I got contacted by a gentleman that had sold his business for $350 million, had bought a huge palace in the Amalfi Coast in Italy, had butlers and chefs and maids and wife and kids, and had everything you could possibly want, more money than you could ever possibly spend. And he was told by a friend to contact me because he had never felt so angry, depressed, and miserable
Mhm.
in his entire life. And that's because him as well as myself, I got to a point where I'd done everything that society had told me I should do, and yet I wasn't finding the fulfillment that I wanted to find in that destination. And so that's when I found meditation. Went in through a really dark and bleak time, and I was led to meditation. And then that turning your attention inward with the meditation and starting to look what's in here that I've been ignoring, and from there I started to find really incredible states of being and presence and just serenity and peace. And we're not really subscribing to peace in our world; we're subscribing to excitement. But really, peace is one of the highest vibrational states that we can get into. It's one just below enlightenment. It's a very profound state, and that's something that we should all be aspiring to, is reaching more peace.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that example. And it's like going off of that, do you think that we have to get to that point where we try all the things and we get all the things before we realize that that's not where it is? Because so much of the world, it seems like we're all on that roller coaster of like, okay, when I have that car, or when I make that amount, then I'll be happy. And do you believe that you have to get to that point where you actually accomplish all those things to realize that's not where it is? Or can we be more proactive to realize that we'll save ourselves some time and anguish in the process?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think, unfortunately, most people tend to need to get to that point. But a big part of what you're doing, what I'm doing, is helping people realize that they don't need to get to that exhaustion and crisis point where they've exhausted themselves in acquiring everything they need to acquire and then reaching a state of misery and then taking the next step inward. What we want to do is start educating our children and our society that we need to integrate. It doesn't mean we need to all run off to a monastery and give away all of our possessions. We can actually live what we call in the Vedic tradition a householder lifestyle, an integrated life, where we're starting to, and we're seeing this in a lot of people around the world now already, where they're combining their daily meditation practices, their breath work, their yoga, their tai chi, their qigong, whatever it is their modality to bring peace, calm, inner fulfillment whilst going to work, whilst having families, whilst hanging out with friends. And so I think we're in a big transitional shift now where it's becoming more and more normalized for us to have both of those worlds intertwined as one. Traditionally, in the past, we had money and householder lifestyles, and then we had renunciant spiritual lifestyles, and they lived in monasteries and ashrams, and these people lived in houses. And I think what we're doing now is we're starting to see this convergence, which is something that your podcast is playing a big role in.
Yeah, yeah, I love that the idea of like integrating it into our life because I know a big barrier for many people is like how do I find the time? I'm already strapped. I'm exhausted. I can't add any more onto my plate, but it's really a beautiful idea when we can see how it can be integrated into our lifestyles and then start to transition into that. So it's not so black and white, like you're either doing it or you're not. So
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And going off of that, I would love to hear your journey, like when you started to realize that, all the external possessions and things weren't where it was at and you weren't feeling that fulfillment. What did that transition period look like for you? And how did you start to integrate some of these practices into your life?
the big step that I took to change my life and turn things around, because I was really in a very poor state. I was having mental health leave from work. I was seeing psychologists, psychiatrists, put on medication, doctors, extreme anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and really quite incapacitated in some way. And I was faced the route of medication and doctors and psychiatrists or therapists, and there was something in me that was just saying, "Hey, this I don't know if this is the right path for me." It wasn't really getting to the core of the problem,
Mhm.
and it was almost like an existential crisis because there was some suicide ideation. And then when I found meditation, which was almost like a divine intervention, it was really a huge shift for me. And what I really loved about the technique that I came across, Transcendental Meditation or Vedic meditation, was that it was very structured. And I like that sort of masculinity about it, which was that there was this sort of set times you do it, for 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there. And I really liked the formula of it. It was something that was accessible, it was deep, it was something that I could quantify and get tangible results out of. So I really liked all of that about it. So what I had to do was to find a way to slice this into my day. And what I realized was that my day comprised of 24 hours, and each hour had three portions of 20 minutes in it, which meant that I had 72 20-minute pieces of pie. And one thing I realized is that everything that everyone's doing on the planet right now is trying to extract fulfillment out of their actions. And that's whether they're cleaning the bathroom floor or going to put bottle tops on bottles in a factory, or whether they're eating ice cream or going to the gym or going to work or watching a movie. It's all in the quest to find fulfillment. And so I thought, well, if that's not working out well for me with the current allocation of my time, I need to change my allocation of time. And all the studies and research and the teachings had pointed to that this meditation technique was going to increase my level of fulfillment without having to extract it from some form of activity. So I made it definitive that I was going to make 2 out of my 72 20-minute pieces of pie on a daily basis, unconditionally allocated to sitting in a chair and meditating. And it still left me with 70 20-minute pieces of pie. I still had an ample amount of time in my day. And what it meant was that I was actually removing a lot of the fluff from my day to allocate it for something that was really potent and really effective, and something that I could really see tangible effects coming out of my life through that 20-minute meditation. So that was really just about not making gargantuan changes in my life, but just making a really small degree of change in my life. And that was just 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there for meditating.
Yeah, I really like the perspective shift of looking at the 72 pieces versus not
Mm.
even having maybe a dimension of time, just thinking you have to like pull 20 minutes from that. Because when you say 2 out of 72 feels like easy, like how could you
Yeah, it's
not
small,
find?
right?
Yeah, 100%. So just that perspective shift that's so powerful, just to shift it into your mind. I really like that. When you first started, how long did it take for you to start feeling some of the impacts of it? And because I know so many people feel like, okay, well, people say I tried meditation and it didn't work, quote, and and I think it's unfortunate because there's so many benefits to it that I think often we give up before we get there. Can you speak on that and how you started to feel when you started, and what did you start to experience as you committed yourself to it?
Yeah, and one reason why I really like this technique, and I did shop around and try lots of different styles of meditation, but what I found with this was that it was quite deep and very impacting quite quickly. And that was kind of what I was looking for. I wanted an ROI, return on investment of my
Mhm.
time and money, to get the benefits that I wanted to get from that. And it sounds very businessy, but that was just the way my mind worked, being in finance. And I noticed the changes within the first few days. Even this week, I'm teaching 10 people from around the world a meditation course, and we've seen within 2 days them all reporting significant changes, not just in the meditation, but outside in their daily life. They're all reporting that they're less reactive. They're finding they've got more spaciousness in their day. They're finding them being able to be calmly going about things without being completely overwhelmed and stressed and hectic. So that was a big thing for me. The sleep was a really big one. I started noticing that I was sleeping much better. I had really chronic insomnia before that, and that first week I was really quite amazed at how easily I could fall asleep. And yeah, it was quite quick that I noticed the changes in my life.
Yeah, really impactful with that. And thank you for sharing. And as far I know, you mentioned some of those mental and emotional and physical impacts you were experiencing. Did what happened with those as you started to meditate?
It was almost like you know when you've got thick clouds in the sky and then the sun
Mhm.
starts to just melt the clouds away and the clouds start to just sort of thin and eventually they disappear. And it was kind of like that, that um, you know, I had anxiety and panic attacks and insomnia and agoraphobia and all sorts of anomalies in my system. And Dr. Bruce Lipton from Stanford University Medical School says that 95% of all sickness is a result of stress. And that was very much the case in my life. So when I remove the stress, the byproduct of stress is sickness. So if I remove the stress, then the sickness goes away with it. And this was a really interesting phenomenon that it just simply the depression, the anxiety, the panic attacks, the insomnia just slowly just melted away within days and weeks. It was quite phenomenal. And you know, it's very science based because when we get the body out of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress response, which is causing the adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine to be surging in our blood, causing the anomalies of anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and insomnia. Then, when we put the body into the parasympathetic nervous system, that peace response, we see all that cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine just simply melt away. We increase our oxytocin, serotonin, and melatonin. The body starts to become more cohesive and more orderly and starts to operate at a higher level. And that means, as a byproduct, all those anomalies, which are the symptoms, just start melting and dropping away. And I think this is one of the big problems we have in the world. We have a lot of very stressed people in sympathetic nervous system. And then they're seeing doctors who are putting them on medication, but we're not getting to the underlying cause of the problem, that their body is in sympathetic nervous system state. And we've got to get our bodies first and foremost into the peace response. And if there's still some problems, then let's treat them. But usually we find a lot of those anomalies melt away once we get sustained parasympathetic nervous system state.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And that's what the body's always moving towards healing, but it has to have the correct environment to do that. And it's like if we're in survival mode, if there's a bear in front of us, our body's not going to take a break and say, I need to heal this first. It's going to just be dealing with that bear. So it's so powerful. And you mentioned the current system, is often we're just putting a band-aid on a gushing wound and wondering why we're not feeling better. It's really powerful when you start to go within yourself and realize that you have the capacity to heal tremendous things in without using all the medications and everything else added onto you. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your experience with that because I think it's like when we share these stories, it's like hopefully empower someone to realize that they have the power within themselves to do that. So I really appreciate it. One thing I would love to know is that just with like the physical body, there's different programs that fit different people and depending on where they are. Is that how it works with meditation? Is it a one size fits all, or are there certain programs or types of meditation that would serve people in a way that's more beneficial to them? And how do we really know that about ourselves and what we should be pursuing?
Yeah, what a great question. Look, I think ultimately we know there's this. We know that beyond the thinking mind and beyond the fluctuating emotions, we have a state of deep, deep serenity. It's called being.
Mhm.
Being is the very core of who we are. It's funny because we call ourselves human beings, and being is this state of conscious awareness. It's a very serene state that doesn't fluctuate, it doesn't change. And that is in Sanskrit, there's a word called Turiya, which means the fourth state, beyond thoughts, beyond feelings, beyond physicality. And this state of presence or awareness or being is unmovable, it's unshakable, it's unruffable, and it's there for everyone. And some would say we have a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual reality. But for most of us, this spiritual component, which is being, is ignored. And that's because we're deep in our thoughts, our feelings, and our physical body. Our world really focuses on those three things as a form of identity. So to transcend and access this fourth state is absolutely critical. Now, how we get there, look, it's there. That's the fundamental reality. Just like the blue sky is always there behind the grey clouds. Doesn't matter what type of clouds they are, there's always blue sky behind that. Um, so it's not whether it's there or not, it is always there. It's just a matter of how do we get there. And there are multiple ways to access it, I believe. I just found for me personally, this transcending style of meditation with mantras to make it much more accessible. If you're on the Calm app listening to Matthew McConaughey read bedtime stories, it might be calming and relaxing, but you're not going to get that transcendent experience and accessing that realm of Turiya, the fourth state. So um, I think for me personally, I suggest to people to shop around, have a look and try different techniques and find ones that resonate with you. You know, you've got this beautiful Vipassana meditation, which is going away and sitting for 10 days in silence, which is derived very much from that monastic Buddhist style background. And it's such a beautiful tradition and pathway, but it's definitely not for everyone. And I would also suggest that maybe Vedic meditation or TM isn't for everyone. And so it really comes down to a subjective relationship with the practice and where you're at in your life and how you want to live your life. And for me, I find the integratedness and the practicality and the efficiency of Vedic meditation to be one for people that live and work in the world, a very sufficient form of meditation that will be a very integrated one.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that insight because it's really helpful for maybe someone who has dabbled in some types of meditations, but to realize that there are so many avenues to pursue that and really experience that. Going off of that, beliefs are so powerful in where we move and the direction we go, and whether things come to us in a way if we believe them, and if we don't believe them, we may be resisting that. How powerful, or what's the impact of that with meditation? If we maybe don't have a belief system behind meditation, can it still have the benefits of it? Or do we need to have that belief system that there are benefits and in order to actually experience them?
Yeah, look, definitely don't need to have a belief system. This is the beautiful thing
Mhm.
about it. You know, I've taught a group of 8-year-old kids in a classroom, 30 of them, and none of them had pre-framed belief systems about meditation. You know, they just were like, oh, there's a man in front of our class and he's teaching us how to do this strange sound repeated inside our head. And they just closed their eyes. And what came out of that was that after 10 minutes, they all had the most profound experiences. I was actually even quite surprised myself to hear what these young children were saying as far as where
Yeah.
they went to in that meditation. And I get that time and time again with school students, with retirees, with people that were dragged to the meditation class by their partner because, their partner said, you need to meditate with this Tom guy. So, they turn up without any belief systems. What I find is there's just a science. It's a really simple science that
Mhm.
is validated after the experience.
Mhm.
And if you have a belief system, then that can help. But if you don't have a belief system, it doesn't get in the way of having the experience because the experience is just simple. When you repeat that primordial vibration inside your head, it has this incredibly profound effect on calming and soothing the mind and the body and putting the body into deep rest. And that's just a sort of a simple process. And once they come out of that simple process, they're like, oh, wow, I definitely noticed a significant change in how I felt. And look,
Mhm.
I've had maybe one or two people that they really struggle with that. People with extreme levels of ADHD,
Mhm.
they probably found that it took a little bit longer to get those types of experiences and benefits. But I haven't found anyone yet that it doesn't have a beneficial outcome for them.
Mhm. Yeah, amazing. 'Cause that, again, that's just so helpful for anyone who is thinking about this. Like, you don't have to shift your entire belief system and just allow yourself to experience that. One other thing, just going off of that, because so many people who listen to this podcast are like those go-getters, high achievers, like, you know, use force often to get things done and are always just going, going, going. How much is meditation just allowing it to happen versus like being like, okay, I got to be really good at this. I have to really work hard at this, and like almost getting the mind in it. Can you talk about the difference between like surrendering and allowing versus like kind of pushing it and maybe
Mm.
overthinking it?
Yeah, 100%. It definitely gets in the way of their practice if they are trying to
Mhm.
strive for that experience in the meditation. This particular style of meditation, it really is a microcosm of the macrocosm of life itself, which is what I love about it. Because in the technique of the meditation, it really is about surrender. Ironically,
Mhm.
we're actually looking to surrender the mantra, surrender the thoughts, surrender our identity, surrender our future, surrender our past. So the more you try, the less
Mhm.
of the experience you're going to have.
Yeah.
And this is also a phenomenon with life itself. There's this beautiful relinquishing and letting go. There's two great books, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer and then Letting Go by David Hawkins, both of them talking about this complete unclenching of life, this complete letting go. And I know a lot of your listeners who might be trying to control life so much, and that causes a lot of stress, a lot of tension, but also repels, because of the vibration that we're in and the law of attraction, the things that we're looking to create in our life so that we can experience fulfillment. And this is the nature of, and the irony of life is that when we're in peace and we just completely surrender and have some intentions, and we do have some degree of obviously action, but action without attachment is so powerful. And the same thing happens with our meditation, action without attachment. We just introduce the mantra, allow it to unfold and take it as it comes. And whatever we experience in that meditation, we just embrace it all, but we don't force it. We don't try and get to some particular destination, and just let it flow. And when we have that approach to life, be amazed at how effortlessly and how how smooth life can go, and how much we can attract in life by simply being in that state in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like that flow state, you just get into it
Mm-hmm.
and things just naturally happen versus like when we rely on the external world, like we're all over the place, we're getting bounced everywhere. So yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that because it's again that control that so many of us struggle to relinquish and just realizing like how much more life can open up to you when you do release that a little bit. Can you
Yeah, I
talk
used to
about
be such a
Vedic? Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I used to be such a control freak. I was a
Yeah.
perfectionist and really wanted to control outcomes, and was really highly
Mhm.
driven and highly motivated, and always like walking around with a furrowed brow in my forehead, trying so hard to make life work out. But all I ended up getting was, completely stressed and overwhelmed in the trying and in the controlling. So it was a really big shift for me. One of the biggest ones that I think meditation brought into my life was this relinquishing of control and just being so much more in flow. And then I was be able, the whole cliche, stop and smell the roses. And so that
Mhm.
made life a lot more enjoyable for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually want to ask a question about that because as you relinquish the control, how much does intuition shift? Like, did you experience any abilities to like tap into intuition and have inner guidance in your decisions in this realm?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? How when we create the space, firstly, just quieting the mind and creating space in our head, when we create the space in our body, when we create the space in our life, it allows things to move towards us, allows us to tune into that subtle guidance system that is these impulses of guidance. I call them impulses of guidance, which some would call intuition or gut feel. But when we've got this busy mind, it's always in the future and in the past and screaming at us all the time. That very subtle communication, go this way, go that way, make this decision, make that decision, get this impulse of creativity. It allows that beautiful subtle intelligence to arise within us, and we're actually able to hear it this time because of the quietness that's been created through
Mhm.
our practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And then did you find that you were able to trust those messages more as you went through the practice?
Yeah, this is one of the beautiful things, is that as you get more of those messages coming through and more trust happening, you develop this ongoing pattern and process of and allowing,
Mhm.
allowing the communication to come through, and trusting it, and then acting on it, and seeing, wow, that was interesting. That unfolded in a really beautiful way. Let's do that again, and so that just becomes your pattern over time.
Yeah. Love that. And going off of, when every time, whenever we go through some growth process or transformation in our life, sometimes there's the external world will shift. Inevitably it shifts and relationships may change and situations may change and we can experience some grief. Did you experience that in your life? Did your external world shift as you started to integrate this into your life and have some internal growth?
Yeah, it's important we don't sugarcoat this. Life still happens, and you go through difficult times. That they're always going to be one of the things that's a certainty, is that life just still happens. And my mother and father passed away last year. We've had difficult times in a business situation a few years ago, and what it does is that it doesn't stop events from happening. What it helps is your
Mhm.
ability to relate to those events and move through those events in a more profound, stable, non-reactive way, but also coming from a place of love and compassion and tenderness. And so I think these are qualities that we're missing a lot in our world, that when we quieten that mind and quieten the stress in the system, these natural inherent qualities that are within us to be more loving, to be more patient, to be more kind, to be more accepting, and to be less emotionally entangled and reactive to circumstances and situations. Like I said, it doesn't stop the situations, but allows you to be moving through those situations in a better way.
How much do you think that would really impact our world if more people started to integrate meditation and really recognize this? We're in such a world where things are so divisive. It's people being pitted against each other, the separation, fear response. How much do you think that as a collective, things could really begin to change when we start to do our own inner work in that?
Yeah, Daniel Schmachtenberger is in our film, one of the brilliant minds on the planet. He says
Mhm.
that our world is set up to be unhealthy and unhappy. And the whole economic model is based on people being unhealthy and unhappy. Those two things really are driving the economic system. Even when we find, because I was in finance, we used to get reports coming out that the economy is slowing down. And one of the things that they always emphasize is we need to spend more, we need to get our money out and we need to buy more things. And this is causing this sort of ripple effect of deterioration in our world based upon the idea that I have to work really hard to make some money, to go and spend that money to prop up the economy, but also to find happiness. But in the process of working really hard and spending really hard and partying really hard, I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker, which means I need to be dependent upon this medical and pharmaceutical system to prop me up because of this system that I'm conditioned into. So it's a complete rewiring and recoding and restructuring of our society to have peaceful, happy people in it that aren't dependent upon this extraction model. So what that looks like is something that I guess, you and I are here inviting the audience to start contemplating what does the world look like if we're all peaceful, happy, and healthy. It's a completely different economic model to have happy, healthy people in it. And we have to think about, gosh, what would that look like? Half of the supermarket would be invalid because most of the supermarket is purely for pleasure seeking. Maybe 80% of a
Yeah.
supermarket is for pleasure seeking. So most of our shopping malls is for pleasure seeking. So we'd have to really redefine the world. Even, it's already starting to happen, which is really exciting. One of the biggest nightclub owners in LA has sold his businesses and starting to create health clubs. And that's because he's sensing people are changing the way they're going to spend their money and the way they're going to live their lives. And I think we're starting to already see a shift. The fact that you and I have this conversation is indicative of that, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that is exciting because it's like you want to get people on board when you start to realize the power that you have within yourself, and you don't need these things to give you that joy in your life. It's really, you can direct that energy in such a more beneficial and fulfilling way rather than constantly just like going to the next thing that says that it'll do what you want it to do and needing all those things in your life. So yeah, I think that it's really exciting. And I think also too, just being aware of that. We can get really trapped in these ideas of like someone knows better than us outside ourselves, or fall into the messages that we need these things in order to do that. So it's like once you cultivate that awareness, you realize that this isn't necessarily your truth in your own journey. So I think it's really powerful with that. And then I just want to go into talking about Vedic meditation because you talked about a few parts of that. Can you talk about it a little bit further? What is that, and what does that look like on a daily basis, and what is your practice like?
Yeah, it's a beautiful, 4, 5, some say 6,000-year-old practice of meditation that's been passed down for thousands of years, originally derived from northern India, and has been integrated into the world in a really big way. Ray Dalio, the world's largest hedge fund manager, tweeted that his key ingredient for his success was this meditation practice. And Oprah Winfrey herself used it and does put a message out that is only from that space can you create your best work and your best life. And the way it works is that you get given a particular mantra or sound, a primordial vibration or resonance that is determined by how old you are when you learn the technique, and when when you came out of the womb and into this world and where the planets were, and that's how the teacher will determine what your mantra is based upon that. And you get taught over 4 90-minute sessions. The way I teach it is in person here in Sydney, and I also teach it on Zoom. So now I'm doing something that isn't quite traditionally done, but I figured that we've got this amazing technology and I can bring this to the world in a bigger way. And it's been quite phenomenal to see how effective it is being delivered through the Zoom format, and we're seeing incredible results that way. So once you learn the technique over those 4 90-minute sessions, there's a fair bit of knowledge to come through the training program with that. Then you get ongoing weekly access to me as the teacher on our Zoom group meditations, but also we teach you how to integrate that on a daily basis into your day so that you've got this beautiful foundation to your day that continues to generate ongoing peace and calm and happiness in your life, that regardless of the external world and the external circumstances. So yeah, it's a very simple process, but it has a lot of knowledge that comes with it as well.
And then when you're in that meditative state, or is it just a calm kind of nothingness, or are you experiencing aspects of maybe a different realm, or what is that like? If you could just describe your experience with that.
Yeah, it fluctuates a lot. It's really quite interesting. It can be very, very dynamic in that people get incredible bursts of creativity and lots of ideas coming through, which is like, oh, I'm supposed to be meditating. It's like that's part of the meditation, is that you'll get these spontaneous epiphanies and insights. You'll also get dips into really deep, deep, expansive quietness where you're out of the thinking mind, out of the physical location that you're in, and in what some would say is this huge sort of spacious universality. It's quite profound and beautiful. It's also extremely calming and quietening. But then sometimes you'll get also other sensations where you might start unlocking stresses, and some of those stresses are a bit uncomfortable. And so, with the right guidance and mentoring from the teacher, and that's why it's a very structured program to give you a deep appreciation and understanding about how that body is looking to release those stresses. We call them samskaras that are trapped in the body. And they can unravel during the meditation, and that can be a little bit uncomfortable as well. And that's just the body releasing the energy of some past traumatic sort of releasing, that's really healthy releasing. It's kind of like a really nice clearing that happens within the body. So it's very different each meditation. We never get attached. We never know what we're going to experience. And knowing that each one is a very powerful and efficient form of rest that happens through the meditation experience.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's another question off of that is that so many people who listen to this are very disconnected from themselves. They've kind of suppressed much of themselves, and physical signals from their body they've suppressed because they just have to keep on going on this rat race that they're on, and just listening to other people more than they're only listening to their own inner voice. How much does that also play a role when you start meditating and your ability to tune into your emotions, your body, yourself? How does that transform?
Yeah, it's so important that we have this integrated experience of mind, body, heart, and soul.
Mhm.
And what I found is this is such a complete practice that the quieting of the mind really allows you to tune into the body. And the body has this internal intelligence. It's quite profound. And we talk a lot about this in the course. If you put a cast around a broken leg, the cast itself isn't fixing the leg, it's just creating stillness, which is we apply the same premise to our meditation. If we apply stillness to the body, it allows the body's intelligence to start healing and renovating and restoring balance. And so we get much, much more in tune with that, much, much more aware of that. And it's actually a really beautiful integrated practice where we integrate awareness with our body and become more congruent and aligned with our body and our body's feelings and needs. Before, I wouldn't listen to my body, I'd listen to my brain, and my brain ruled the roost and would override anything my body wanted to do. If my body would be like saying, hey, I'm really tired, I don't want to go out tonight, I'm like, hey, we're going out tonight. And
Mhm.
when you meditate, you start listening to your body and your body's needs, and I think you
Mhm.
yeah, look after it in a much bigger, better way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. 'Cause that is so, I mean, I think so many of us can relate to that. Like we're in our mind and it is just dictating everything. We're ruminating over everything and we just want to like put the off switch on, like we just want to shut down. So like going into our body is so powerful to be able to do that and really tune into ourselves again. And one thing I would love to know too is like, so as far as your overall practice, how important is it to have like physical practices as well? So do you just need to integrate a meditative practice to feel these benefits, or do you also need to have your physical aspects in tune and other aspects like of overall holistic life?
Yeah, so important, that question. And, it comes really nicely from what we just talked about with it being able to listen into your body. And, your body has very specific requirements. It needs to drink a sufficient amount of clean, purified water.
Mhm.
Ideally, that water should have, maybe a pinch of salt or some, maybe some hydrolytes or something that, I have NAD and NMN and things that are going to replenish and integrate that water into my body in a better way. My body needs physical movement. It needs to develop muscles. So I really teach and believe we should have a very holistic approach to wellness. There's definitely not a one-stop shop. Meditation isn't the cure-all.
Mhm.
I do ice baths, I do yoga, I do gym workouts, I make sure that I'm eating the right foods. I'm, getting to bed on time. Sleep is such an important part of recovery and our overall well-being. It's one of the key areas that I think is being totally dismissed as a powerful force and a powerful form of recovery and healing. So we've got to make sure that we get sufficient sleep. So yeah, definitely we need a holistic approach. We need a good relationships. We need good community. We need a sense of purpose. We need a sense of contribution. So all of these things is, for me, I believe, a very holistic approach to living
Mhm.
the fullness and the optimized experience of human existence.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And for someone who's listening right now and they're like, okay, where do I even start? Like they're feeling like, okay, I love this. They're really like resonating with everything, but they're like, okay, how do I take the first step? What would you say to that person who's just wants to like take that first little step towards living their life like this?
you know, I, there's lots of things you could do. You could say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, or I'm going to do some breath work, every 4 days, or I'm going to make sure I start going to bed at 10 o'clock or 9:30 instead of 2 o'clock playing Fortnite,
Mhm.
and making these little micro changes. There's a beautiful story about Sir David Brailsford, who was given the role of coaching the English cycling team, and they had never won any medals. They were just one of the weakest cycling teams in the world, and he started making these micro changes to the seats and the socks they were wearing and the way they were training, and these little 1% degrees of change in everything that they were doing, and they all started to add up into them becoming an extremely successful cycling team. So he became very famous about these micro habits that he started to change in the team. And we can do it that way. I tend to find personally that my biggest changes happened after I started meditating. The thing that I found is that we can make a lot of these changes in our life, but if we're not addressing the underlying stress response, that's the sympathetic nervous system, and getting our body into that really calm parasympathetic nervous system state, all those other changes can be almost a little bit superficial in some respects. I found for me personally, starting with the meditation was the way that my life turned around the most, because I was still going to the gym and I was doing a lot of those other things anyway, but I still wasn't getting that significant change. So I would suggest personally, and this might sound like self promoting, but I would usually suggest finding a teacher that's qualified in teaching a meditation that you resonate with. For me, that's Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation. Finding a teacher that teaches that, going through a formal training with someone that's qualified. This is a very important step. It's one thing to watch a YouTube video or listen to someone on a Calm app or Headspace, but I find having that formalized, personalized training with someone makes a huge difference when it comes to learning something like meditation. And we can have something down in the show notes where they can go and find some more details if they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so helpful because so many of us can get stuck in that like I'm working out, I'm doing all the things and then still like going back to old patterns a month later and not knowing why. So it's like going into that deeper and realizing this could be that missing piece that is the key to actually making that long-lasting transformation. Absolutely huge. And for someone who wanted to connect with you, where can they find you and how can they get into some of the workshops and events that you have going on?
Yeah, look, Instagram is a great platform. I find very something about it's quite personal. So
Mhm.
I find that's a place where they can message me at Tom Cronin, TomCronin, and yeah, I love hearing from the community. So feel free to reach out and message me. And my website's Tom Cronin as well, tomcronin.com. And yeah, we can have something in the show notes from below.
Amazing. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. So definitely connect with Tom and check out all the events and everything he has going on. It's amazing. And I am just so incredibly grateful for everything you shared today. I know that this has planted some seeds in people's heads to just start making those little changes so that it can really grow and become a whole new version of themselves. So I really appreciate everything you shared today.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening in, everyone. And thanks for such great questions. It's been such a lovely time sharing space with you.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it too. Thank you again. Thank you for everyone who tuned in today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If there was something in this episode that really resonated with you or a message that stuck with you, please share it with someone else. It's only through sharing these messages that we can start to rewire our minds to feel empowered and live the life that we truly desire. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to Rewiring Health.